She was the fiercest, untamable alien woman in the colony, until a human took her in.
The market district of the Rose Verge was nearly silent after dark. Rain fell in steady sheets, tapping against rusted awnings and trickling down broken drain pipes. The cages that lined the alleys were still open from the day's trade, their doors swinging on hinges that hadn't been oiled in years. Chains lay on the ground, coiled in puddles, heavy with brown rust. The stall smelled of wet fabric, burned oil, and fruit left too long on display. From one of those cages, a woman forced herself free. Her name was Saren, though no one in the district had cared enough to use it. To most, she was only the wild one. She had refused to obey the handlers, had clawed and bitten when they tried to dress her or lead her in chains. For that, she had been beaten, starved, and finally locked up for show. Tonight, while the guards slept off their drink, she had pulled the pins loose from a rusted lock and forced her way through the bars, scraping her ribs raw in the process. She stumbled barefoot into the street. Her skin, a pale violet with faint silver undertones, was streaked with mud and bruises. Torn silk hung from her shoulders and hips, the remnants of a halter and skirt shredded from weeks of handling. Every step was unsteady. She had not eaten properly in days. The wet stone chilled her feet and sent sharp pain up her calves. Saren's heart pounded as she crossed the first row of shuttered shops. She looked left and right with quick, animal-like movements. She half expected someone to drag her back at any moment. But no one came. A man at a noodle stall noticed her, stared for 2 seconds, and then looked away. Another man, leading his child home, tightened his grip on the boy's arm and turned down another street without a word. The people of the Rose Verge were used to seeing broken lives spill into the streets. No one wanted trouble. Her throat ached. If no one stops me, where do I go? The thought panicked her. She had no plan beyond escape. The rain washed her hair into her face, and she pushed it back with shaking hands. Hunger tightened her stomach until she felt nauseous. At the corner, a cargo trike roared past and brushed her hip. She spun, slapping the metal panel with her palm. The driver didn't slow down. She hissed after him, but the sound was drowned by the rain. She pressed against the wall, her breathing shallow, chest tight. She realized she wasn't afraid of being caught. She was afraid of vanishing, afraid that no one would even notice if she collapsed right there in the gutter. She forced herself forward through a loading tunnel that smelled of hot coolant and mold. She held the wall for balance, her legs trembling. At the end of the tunnel, a courtyard opened into a cluster of residential towers. The place was lifeless. The planters were filled with dry soil, a cut tree stump sat under a bench, and neon signage from a shopfront flickered across the wet ground. Above, most windows were dark, but one, on the 7th floor of the far tower, glowed with a steady amber light. She looked up at it and clenched her jaw. A door, a chance, or another trap. With no better choice, she climbed the concrete stairs. Her body screamed with fatigue. Her wrists ached, and her ankles were swollen from the iron shackles. Twice, she had to stop and breathe hard, pressing her forehead against the wall. By the time she reached the 7th floor, her pulse was ragged, and she could barely see straight. The corridor carpet was soaked from leaks in the ceiling. Her footprints left a trail of water. She reached the amber-lit door and leaned against the frame to steady herself. Before she could raise her hand, the door opened. The man inside filled the doorway. Darren Miles, 40 years old, former colonial scout. He had worked reconnaissance during the siege of Orvan 5 years earlier, but left military life behind when the fighting ended. He now worked as a data surveyor, mapping fiber lines and water routes for the city archives. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid quietly, and he preferred solitude to the politics of war. His apartment sat at the edge of the Rose Verge, a place no one envied, but no one bothered either. He stood with calm posture, one hand resting loosely against the frame. His broad shoulders filled a weathered jacket darkened by rain. His boots were worn but solid. His short hair was streaked with gray at the edges, and a trimmed beard covered his jaw. His eyes locked on her immediately, scanning the bruises, the torn clothing, the way her knees shook. His military training told him what he was looking at. Escapee, starved, on the edge of collapse. But his voice stayed low even. Inside, he said. Her heart leapt. The tone wasn't a command. It wasn't hunger or pity. It was a simple offer. Yet she didn't trust it. Another cage. Another trick. You lock doors, she rasped, her throat raw. Only to keep others out, he said. He reached into his pocket and placed a small brass key on the floor between them. You hold it if you want. Your choice. She stared at the key, confused. Her breathing was ragged. No one had ever given her control of a door. She bent slowly, picked it up, and felt the weight in her palm. The teeth were sharp against her skin. She stepped past him. Her body stiffened, ready to strike if he reached for her. He didn't. He only stepped aside and let her move into the apartment. The room smelled faintly of soap, boiled water, and old stone. The walls were cracked. A cot stood near the window with patched blankets folded over it. A table was stacked with cloths, tools, and a metal flask. A small heater glowed in the corner, throwing a line of warmth across the floor. The space was simple, lived in, not prepared for guests. Her thoughts tumbled. He's alone. No chains. No cage. Just a bed. A lock. What game is this? He closed the door behind her. The sound of the lock clicked, and her chest tightened, panic rising, until he nodded at her fist. Your key works from this side, he said. Try it. She shoved it into the lock, twisted, and felt the mechanism click. She pulled the door open an inch, saw the hallway outside, then slammed it shut and locked it again. She held the key tighter, her breathing fast. He watched her without moving closer. You're cold, he said. There's heat. Food, if you want it. He motioned toward the table. Sit or don't. It's your call. Her eyes narrowed. She stepped forward slowly, her muscles coiled. If he touches me, I'll tear him apart. But he didn't touch her. He walked to the stove, lit a burner with practiced ease, and set water to boil. His hands were steady, his movements deliberate. He said nothing more, as if silence was the safest gift he could give her. For the first time since escaping the cage, Saren's body loosened, just slightly. Her mistrust didn't vanish, but she realized something unsettling. She was more afraid of this man's calmness than she had been of the guard's violence. Violence she understood. This quiet patience she did not. And that, more than the rain or the hunger, left her shaken. Steam lifted from the pot and fogged the window. Saren stood half-turned toward the door with the brass key in her fist, shoulders squared, eyes fixed on Darren's hands, as if any sudden move would trigger the reflex to strike. He kept his pace measured while he cut the flame and poured tea through a wire strainer into 2 chipped mugs. He raised one to his lips first, swallowed, and set it down within her reach. Only then did he plate food, bread warmed on the stove edge, a small slab of roasted root, a tin of fish and oil, his movements neat, his breathing even. She waited for a tell, a glance at her chest, a shift of weight to block the way out, a false smile that meant the next choice had already been made for her. None came. He pushed the plate closer with one finger and stepped back until the table was between them, not as a barrier, but as distance she could measure. Why did your door open before I knocked? She asked, voice rough from disuse. I heard you on the stairs, he said. This building carries sound, and I check the hall when the rain gets loud. People slip. You waited for me? I didn't know it was you, he said. I saw wet footprints stop at my door. She looked down at the water pooling under her feet and felt a rush of heat in her face that had nothing to do with the heater. Shame flickered up. Mud on his floor, rain in his room. Then anger rose to crush it because shame had been trained into her and anger was hers. She sat anyway. The chair creaked. She took a bite of bread and watched him over the rim of the mug. He did not look away. The first mouthful knotted in her chest. She forced it down, waited for dizziness or the slow sink that meant drugged tea, felt none, and ate. Salt and oil steadied her. Heat worked into her arms. Her hands stopped shaking. What's your work? She asked, besides waiting for footprints. Data survey, he said. I map fiber runs and water lines for the district. People call when they lose signal or pressure. I document where the old routes break, where they can be patched without ripping streets open. Why this tower? Cheap, he said. Quiet. close to the East Main, so I can monitor leaks nights without crossing the district. I come and go at odd hours. No one asks questions here. And your mission? She pressed, the words stiff in her mouth. To keep what still works from failing, he said, and to stop doing harm. I did enough of that before. His eyes had a stillness that didn't match his age, the kind of stillness that comes after you've seen the pattern repeat and decided to step out of it. She registered the assessment and filed it beside the other facts. The way he had placed the key on the floor, the way he drank first, the way he gave her options and then left the silence alone so she could use them. She swallowed more tea and felt warmth settle into her stomach. You expect pay, she said flatly. No. He leaned a hip to the counter, hands open. I expect you to be safe here tonight. That's it. The simplicity startled her. Her mind reached for a trick it could not find, and that absence made her pulse jump. Violence she could predict. Indifference she could endure. But a rule she set herself felt like a drop-off in the floor. She rose, moved to the sink, and used the cloth he had offered earlier to clean the mud from her calves. He faced the wall and checked a small screen he'd propped on a shelf. District pressure logs, simple bars and numbers, giving her the cover of his inattention while still holding the room. She scrubbed her wrists slower than needed. The skin there looked worse in the warm light. Raw, scabbed, pinched in ridged circles. He saw it when he turned back and didn't hide the way his jaw tightened. I have a field kit, he said. I can clean and wrap those. You can watch every step. She hesitated, weighing the balance between pain now and infection later. Her scars itched under drying skin. She set the cloth down. Do it where I can see your hands, she said. No tricks. He brought the kit to the table and opened it with the care of someone trained not to waste motion. Alcohol wipes, gel gauze rolls, tape. He washed his hands in view of her, returned, and touched her forearm only to brace it on a folded towel. The swab stung. She kept her face blank and watched his thumbs, the angle of his wrists, the pressure of each wrap. He checked her eyes before every pass, not asking permission with words, asking it by waiting. She gave it with short nods, and each nod cost less than the last. Why did you refuse? He asked quietly, binding the last strip flat. Obey. She held his gaze. Because the first time I obeyed, I lost my name, my voice, my sleep, and the right to stand. The second time, I would have lost the part that still knows when to fight. He taped the edge. And how did you break out? I watched hands, she said. People teach you how to leave without meaning to. They get lazy. I took a bracket from a fan and a rock from the drain. The hinge pin was soft. Smart, he said. Lucky. Both, he said, and meant it. Her chest eased a fraction. Respect cost him nothing, but she felt its weight and cataloged it with a strange relief that made her want to snarl just to keep the ground from feeling less tilted. He cleared the wrappings and rinsed the cloths, then handed her a folded shirt from short stack on a chair. Dry. You can change here, he said, nodding to a screen he unfolded and set between the cot and the rest of the room. Or the bathroom if you want a door. She took the shirt and the screen surprised her. It was simple. Fabric stretched across a frame. No hinges, no tricks. He set it up and stepped to the window, back turned. She changed behind the screen with quick movements, sliding into tight black trousers and the deep-cut top from the chair, the fabric snug around her ribs, the waistband sitting square on her hips, the breath she let out afterward louder than she liked. She bundled the torn silk and held it up as evidence. This goes out, she said. I'll burn it on the balcony, he said. It'll smoke. Let it, she said. I don't want to see it when I wake up. He slid the door to a narrow balcony, used a small metal dish, and lit the fabric from the edge. Rain hissed against the flare. The smell of burned dye drifted in, sharp and final. She watched the last scrap curl black and drop ash, and something in her sternum loosened. Do they come looking? He asked, closing the door. From a market. No one pays for what they think is broken, she said. They just get new stock. The anger in her voice was clean, not flailing, and he noted it because clean anger is fuel that can be directed while flailing anger burns everything it touches. He recognized both. He had carried both. He laid another blanket on the cot and adjusted the heater a notch. The bed is yours. I'll take the chair. She stepped between him and the cot, testing, not yielding the path, and he shifted the other way instead of pressing through. She checked the door again, locked, unlocked, locked, the key firm in her hand. She checked the window catch and the balcony latch. He let her. He poured more tea and drank half of it with his eyes on the rain. "Why did you leave scouting?" she asked. "I was good at finding weak points," he said. "When you do that long enough, you start to see people as routes and obstacles. I decided to step away before that view stuck. And now your mission is pipes and wires," she said, a small edge of irony on the words. "And keeping people alive at the boring level," he said. "Heat working, clean water not running out. It's not noble. It matters." He wasn't defending himself. He was reporting facts. The comment it pulled at something she had tried to bury. The memory of simple needs that didn't have to be earned with pain. Her throat tightened. "You opened the door because you heard me," she said, as if confirming a law of physics. "I opened it because I was tired of closing it," he said, and let the truth stand there without dressing it up. "Years back, I shut a door on a man who needed help because I had rations only for one. He didn't make the night. I sleep lighter now." There it was, an answer no handler would give and no buyer would risk. Not a story for pity, just a marker for how his choices worked. She filed it with the rest and felt her stance ease. She crossed to the cot and sat. The mattress gave under her weight and held. She stretched one leg, then the other, toes flexing, oil from the fish still slick on her tongue, heat from the tea settled in her gut, wrist wrapped snug. She lay back, then sat up again, because lying down in a room with a man required proof. "Give me the key," she said. "You keep it," he said. "If I sleep with it in my hand, I won't sleep," she said. "You hold it, where I can see it." He opened his palm. She placed the key there and didn't let go for a second, pressing metal into his skin until both of them had the same mark. "You put it on the table," she said. He set it down between them where lamplight shone along its teeth. "There." Her chest loosened for real this time. She slid her hands under the blanket and pulled it up. The fabric smelled like clean dust and sun. The heater ticked. The building settled. She stared at the ceiling and counted 5 steady breaths, then 10, then listened to the rain on the glass and the low hum of the line monitor on the shelf. "You have questions," he said from the chair, not prying, just allowing. "If I sleep and wake up to hands, I break your fingers," she said. "Fair," he said. "If I wake and you're gone, I take the knife and go," she said. "The bag stays where it is. If anyone knocks, you don't open," she said. "I don't," he said. Silence stretched out and found its shape. Her eyelids felt heavy. The cot held her without sinking. The wrap on her wrist itched as the gel dried. She wanted to ask him his worst memory and then crush it under her heel. She wanted to stand in the rain and scream the hour she lost to a cage. She wanted to eat again and not be hungry. She wanted a door that stayed a door and didn't become a mouth. "You asked my mission," she said into the dim. "It's simple. Stay free until morning. Decide what comes after when my stomach stops twisting." "Good mission," he said. "My mission tonight is simpler. Keep you warm. Keep the door quiet." She turned on her side to face him. He had taken off his jacket and draped it over the chair back. He sat with his boots planted and his hands loose, eyes open but soft enough that she recognized vigilance without threat. He looked like a man who would stay in that position until his body punished him for it. And he accepted the punishment because it kept a promise. "Why are you alone?" she asked, voice fading with fatigue. "You look like a man people follow." "I used to be," he said. "I prefer one door to guard." The answer landed in her chest with a weight that steadied more than it frightened. She let her eyes close and felt the map of the room in her body. The door 3 steps away, the chair 2, the window 6, the heater at her feet, his breath across the space measured by the soft rasp of his beard as he shifted once to ease his back. Her mind threw the last barbed straw into the quiet. Trust makes you slow. Slow gets you taken. She answered it with the plain report of the night. He had given her a lock, food, heat, space, and a room to choose. She set the barbed straw down and turned her face to the pillow. She slept hard and fast for the first time since she could count days, not because she felt safe in the world, but because she felt safe in this room, and that distinction was clear and enough. In the chair, Darren watched the door, the window, the line monitor, and the motion of her ribs under the blanket, a small rise and fall that told him his new mission had started, and it was not the one he had expected when he lit the stove, and he committed to it without speech. Keep the heat even, wake before her, and be here when she opened her eyes. So her first sight was the same calm, the same distance, the same key on the table. Near dawn, the rain slowed. Pipes in the wall clicked as pressure shifted through the East Main. A train crossed the far viaduct, and the sound rolled in a low band that never broke the room. He stood once to add a blanket when her shoulders twitched from a draft, and she did not wake. He sat again and laid the brass key so the light would catch in the morning. He waited with the steadiness of someone who had chosen this watch and would not be relieved. In the first gray light, Saren stirred, and for one hard second her hand searched for a chain that was not there. Then memory aligned with the room, and she found the key on the table and Darren in the chair, and she knew exactly why she was here and what came next. Morning, a door she could open herself, and the right to decide the next step with a clear head. Morning light slipped through the blinds in faint gray lines, catching on the dust that hovered in the air. The rain had stopped some time before dawn, leaving the district outside still and washed. Pipes in the walls clicked as the main line shifted pressure, a sound Darren had grown used to, but that made Saren jolt awake, eyes sharp and body tense before she even remembered where she was. Her hand shot toward the table for the key. It was still there, exactly where he had left it, glinting in the pale light. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He was still in the chair, boots planted, jacket draped over the backrest, his head lowered, but his eyes open. He hadn't left. For a moment, she stayed silent, studying him. He really stayed the whole night. Didn't move, didn't try. Why? The thought unnerved her more than comforted her. "You didn't sleep," she said, voice flat but edged with curiosity. "Enough," he replied. His voice was rougher than last night, but calm. He shifted his shoulders as if the chair had punished him, but made no complaint. She sat up, pulling the blanket to her chest. Hunger came back sharp, twisting her stomach. The memory of the food from last night, salty fish and bread, rose in her mind. The listeners would wonder, did she trust him enough to eat again, or would she starve rather than depend on him? She answered the question herself by glancing at the table. The plate had been cleared, but he had set aside another piece of bread, wrapped in cloth, and a small bowl of root slices. "You prepared more," she said. "You'll need it," he answered simply. She hesitated, weighing pride against need. Her eyes narrowed as she pulled the bread from the cloth, tore a piece, and bit down. This time she didn't hesitate as long. The heat in her chest spread again, steadier than the night before. "Why didn't you take the bed?" she asked suddenly. "You sat in that chair all night when you could have pushed me onto the floor." His jaw tightened, but not with anger. "Because you've had enough nights like that." The answer landed heavier than she expected. She blinked and looked away, chewing slowly, feeling her throat tighten. No one had ever said it so directly before. She forced her voice to stay sharp. "And what do you want in return, dear Miles?" No one gives without wanting something. He took his time before answering. "What I want is for you to stop expecting chains every time someone opens a door." She stared at him, almost offended by the simplicity. "That's not how the world works." "I know," he said, eyes steady, "but it's how this room works." Her pulse jumped. She wanted to laugh at him, wanted to spit at the idea, but the way he said it, plain, serious, without trying to impress, cut through her practiced defenses. She turned her head, hiding the sudden warmth in her face. She rose from the cot, standing in the clothes he had given her. Tight black trousers, a deep-cut top that hugged her ribs, both snug from wear. She tugged the hem down and prowled barefoot across the room. She opened the bathroom door, glanced inside at the cracked sink and small mirror, then shut it again. She opened the balcony door and leaned into the damp air, eyes scanning the courtyard below. No one was waiting. No guards, no handlers. Just a quiet city that didn't care. That, too, felt like a kind of threat being forgotten. Her voice dropped lower, more serious. "If they come, will you give me up?" "No," he said. No hesitation. "Why not?" "Because I don't see a slave. I see someone trying to stay alive. That's not something I turn away." She faced him, searching his face for cracks, for lies. But he held her stare until she looked away first. A silence stretched. The listeners would wonder about her background. Who was she before the cage? Why was she branded untamable? She answered by stepping closer, her expression hard. They caught me because I refused to kneel, she said. That's all. They called it defiance. I called it survival. They stripped my name, my voice, my worth. They put me in a cage because I wouldn't play tame. And now, Darren asked quietly. Her throat worked. Now I test every hand that reaches for me, because the next one might close. He didn't argue. He didn't soften. He only said, then keep testing. She blinked, caught off guard. You don't mind? If I fail, I shouldn't be here, he said. Her lips parted, a flicker of something close to surprise breaking through her sternness. She almost smiled, but the weight of habit pulled it back into a scowl. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, not from cold, but because she didn't know what else to do with the sudden crack in her armor. The morning settled. She finished eating in silence, pacing the room as though mapping it. Darren tidied the table, methodical, not crowding her. She checked the lock again, twisted the key, opened the door an inch to see the hallway, then closed it fast, pressing her forehead against the wood. You could still be a trap, she muttered. Then use the key, he said. You decide. That word again, decide. It lodged in her mind like a stone she couldn't shake loose. When she finally turned back to him, her voice was quiet, but her eyes burned. If I stay, I'm not property, not a pet, not a burden, not a body you keep for your bed. You'll stay as you, Darren said, his voice steady. Or not at all. Her chest tightened. She hated that his answer sounded like the truth. She hated that part of her wanted to believe it. She hated even more that she already did. For the first time since escaping, Saren sat back on the cot without her shoulders square to fight. She still gripped the blanket tight, but her body eased into the mattress. She looked at him, really looked, and whispered the question that had been gnawing since she saw his face in the doorway. Why me? Why open the door at all? Darren leaned back in the chair, eyes steady on hers. Because 5 years ago, at Orvin, I didn't open it for someone else. And I've been carrying that mistake ever since. This time, I wasn't going to repeat it. She froze, staring, her mind struggling to accept that answer. Then she lay down slowly, turning to face the window, rain-streaked glass catching the pale light. She pulled the blanket higher, key clutched under her palm. Her voice came muffled, low, almost uncertain. Then you'll have to prove you don't regret it. I intend to, Darren said. The silence after that was different, no longer empty, but charged, waiting. And for the first time, Saren's eyes closed without fear, snapping them open again. The hours of the morning dragged into gray light. Outside, the streets of the Rose Verge resumed their indifferent rhythm. Vendors shouting, wheels scraping, a train groaning over the viaduct. But inside the 7th-floor apartment, the air stayed heavy, taut, shaped by the space between two people who did not yet know what they were building. Saren hadn't left the cot. She sat cross-legged on the mattress, blanket around her shoulders, her violet skin catching faint reflections from the window. Her eyes tracked Darren the way an animal watches a fire, warily, drawn close enough to feel warmth, but always ready to leap away. He worked at the table, repairing a small field scanner with a cracked housing. His hands moved with steady precision, his focus absolute. He said nothing unless words were needed. That silence unsettled her more than raised voices ever had. Why doesn't he ask? Why doesn't he demand? Finally, she stood, letting the blanket fall. She prowled barefoot across the floor, hips rolling with deliberate provocation. She stopped at the edge of the table and leaned on it, lowering her face to catch his gaze. You sit here like this is normal, she said, voice sharp. A stranger in your room, a runaway in your bed, and you eat and fix your toys like I don't exist. I know you exist, he said, not looking up yet. He tightened a screw, set the scanner down, then lifted his eyes to meet hers. That's why I don't pretend. Her lips curled. Not even curious? Not even a little? You don't want to know how I taste, how I move, how I break. She stepped closer, standing now between his chair and the cot, cutting his space in half. She tugged at the edge of the top he had given her, letting it slip lower on her shoulder. The room thickened with the challenge. Darren exhaled through his nose, slow, deliberate. His voice came calm, even. If you think pressing me makes me stronger, you're wrong. If you think testing me makes me leave, you're wrong too. But if you want me to see you as a person, not a game, stop turning every step into a trap. Her jaw tightened. The answer wasn't what she wanted. It was what she feared. He wasn't playing. He wasn't chasing. He wasn't even resisting in the way men usually did. He was steady, unmoved, harder to shake than chains. You don't flinch, she whispered, almost bitter. You don't grab. You don't run. What are you, Darren Miles? A man who's tired of cages, he said simply. Something in her chest stuttered. She hated the sting in her eyes. She looked away fast, hiding it by pacing to the window. Her reflection stared back, hair tangled down her back, top too tight, trousers clinging to her thighs, wrists wrapped neat with his bandages. She saw herself and felt the clash, wild, broken, fed, safe. She hated the mix. Behind her, his voice stayed even. I'm not here to tame you. I'm here because I opened the door. What you do now is yours to choose. She turned, the words breaking her anger into fragments. And if I choose to burn it all down, then I'll sit in the chair and watch the fire with you, he said. For the first time, her lips twitched into something close to a smile. Not soft, but sharp, dangerous, alive. She crossed the room, crouched on the cot, and yanked the blanket back over herself. You're stubborn, she muttered. He sat back in his chair, arms folded. I've been called worse. She curled under the blanket, glaring at him from across the room, but her body softened against the mattress, her breathing slowing as exhaustion pulled her down again. She hated the comfort, hated that she wanted to stay, hated that she didn't leave when she could. And Darren, silent in his chair, knew she had just given him his first victory. Not by submission, not by obedience, but by staying in the room when every instinct told her to run. The sky over the Rose Verge dimmed again before either of them spoke another word. The rain had returned by evening, soft at first, then heavy enough to drum against the glass and mask the sound of the city below. Inside the apartment, the air was close with the heat of the small coil stove and the faint smell of bread he had warmed for their second meal. Saren sat cross-legged on the cot, picking at the frayed edge of the blanket. Her eyes kept shifting to him, to the chair he refused to leave. Darren worked a field knife across a whetstone, the rasp steady, his focus on the blade. He could feel her watching, but didn't feed the tension. The silence had weight. Finally, she broke it. You stay in that chair like it's a wall between us. You afraid of me? No, he said, calm. He set the knife down and met her gaze. I'm giving you space. Her lips curved into a half smile, but her voice stayed sharp. Space feels like distance. Distance feels like leaving. You don't look like a man who leaves, but you sit there like one. She stood, barefoot on the cold floor, and crossed the room with slow, deliberate steps. Her hair was loose now, falling down her back, damp from where she had washed earlier. The bandages on her wrists stood out pale against violet skin. She stopped in front of him, close enough that he could feel her body heat. You don't touch, she said, voice low. Not last night, not this morning. You wait, and you watch, and you act like patience is strength. But what if I want to know if your hands are real? Darren's jaw tightened, but he held her gaze. Then you reach, Saren, not me. She studied him for a long second, her breathing faster now. Her fingers twitched at her sides before she lifted one and pressed it against his chest. His shirt was warm from his body heat, steady beneath her touch. She waited for him to grab her wrist, to pull her closer, to prove himself the same as the rest. He didn't move. Her eyes narrowed. You sit still like stone. Doesn't that tempt you? Of course it does, he said quietly, his voice even but rougher than before. But I won't be the one to cage you, even with touch. That answer disarmed her more than any hand could. Her throat tightened. She pressed harder against his chest, then slid her hand upward, fingers curling against the side of his neck. His pulse was steady under her touch. His eyes stayed locked on hers, unblinking, as if daring her to decide. She leaned in suddenly, her lips brushing his, fierce and testing. sharp like a bite. He didn't grab, didn't push away, he only kissed back with calm, controlled pressure. That steadiness made her shiver. She deepened it, fierce again, almost punishing, but the more she pressed, the more she felt his restraint holding steady. When she pulled back, her breath was ragged. She stared at him, searching his face for triumph, for arrogance, for claim. There was none, just patience and the quiet heat of a man who wanted but refused to take. "You're either the strongest man I've met," she whispered, "or the weakest, or just the right kind," he said. The answer made her chest ache. She hated the sting in her eyes, the mix of fury and relief in her body. She turned, pacing to the window, arms folded tight. "You don't make sense," she muttered. "I'm wild, I'm broken, I tear at everything I touch, and you just sit there like it doesn't scare you." "It doesn't," he said simply. "It tells me you're alive." She froze at the window, rain streaking the glass in long lines. Her reflection looked back at her, half-dressed in tight clothes scavenged from the stalls, hair tangled, body marked by bruises. For the first time, she didn't see only ruin. She saw a woman standing, unbroken, testing, still untamed. When she turned back to him, her expression had shifted. Her eyes were still fierce, but softer now, the edge blunted by something dangerous, trust. She walked back to the cot, pulled the blanket aside, and sat. Her voice was quiet but firm. "You won't touch unless I choose." "Right," he said. "Then tonight," she said, staring at him, "I choose." The words hung in the room like a blade suspended by a thread. Darren rose slowly from the chair. He crossed to the cot without hurry, his boots thudding softly against the floor. He stopped at the edge, waiting. Saren pulled the blanket back, making space beside her. Her eyes burned with defiance, but her hands trembled when she gripped the fabric. He sat carefully, the mattress dipping under his weight. She leaned into him first, her head pressing against his shoulder. The simple contact broke something inside her. Anger, fear, the armor she had worn for too long. She clung to him then, fierce but desperate, her breath fast against his neck. Darren wrapped an arm around her, steady, protective, not restraining. His other hand rested lightly against her back, waiting, never pushing. She pressed closer, burying her face against him. The rain outside masked the sound of her breathing softening, the way her body finally let go. For the first time since escaping, Saren slept not with her fists clenched, not with her body ready to fight, but curled against another person by choice. And Darren, sitting with her weight against him, knew the test had changed. She hadn't just reached for his hands. She had reached for his presence, and he would not fail that. The morning broke slowly, pale light slipping through cracks in the blinds. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets below washed and eerily quiet. The smell of damp concrete drifted in through the balcony door. Darren woke first. His back ached from sitting half-slouched against the cot, but he didn't move right away. Saren was still curled against him, her hair tangled across his chest, her breath warm against his shirt. Her wrists, bandaged neatly the night before, rested loose and open, not clenched as they usually were in sleep. He studied her face in the gray light. Sharp cheekbones, long lashes, the faint tension even in rest that told him her mind never truly let go. He eased himself free, careful not to wake her, and crossed the room. He boiled water on the stove, tore another piece of bread, and set out what food he had left: dried root, a half tin of fish, a small jar of grain. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Saren stirred at the sound, eyes snapping open. For one split second she was wild again, muscles coiled to spring. Then she saw him, saw the food, and her breath slowed. She sat up, hair falling over her face, and pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "You move quiet," she said, voice rough. "Old habit," he replied. Her eyes narrowed. "Scout habit." He nodded. He didn't deny it. She watched him a long moment, then gave a small huff and climbed off the cot. She stretched, the blanket slipping off one shoulder, exposing her violet skin where the top clung to her ribs. She caught him looking, not with hunger, but with the steady observation of someone taking stock, and her lips curled in defiance. "You stare like a soldier counting threats," she said. "Not threats," he corrected. "Details. Hunger. Tension. The way you hold your arms when you wake. It tells me what you need." "And what do I need, Darren Miles?" "Food. Heat. Rest. Choices." The answer disarmed her more than she liked. She sat at the table, snatched a piece of bread, and tore into it. "You talk simple," she muttered. "No speeches. No promises. Just words like nails hammered in." "Words are cheaper when they stretch too far," he said. Her eyes flicked up, sharp, but something in them softened. She chewed in silence for a while, then asked the question the listeners would have been waiting for since her escape. "Why stay here? Why this broken district, this crumbling tower? A man like you could have gone anywhere." Darren sipped his tea before answering. "Because in places like this, nobody watches. Nobody interferes. People are invisible here, and sometimes invisible is safer." Her jaw clenched. Invisible. She had been that for too long. Yet the way he said it carried no insult, only practicality. She let the thought settle, even if it stung. After eating, she rose and prowled the apartment again, testing boundaries. She opened the bathroom cabinet, rifled through his supplies, bandages, soap, a cracked razor. She tugged at the balcony latch, tested the strength of the lock, scanned the courtyard below. Darren let her. When she finally turned back, her expression was half playful, half daring. "You let me tear through your things. Not afraid I'll take your knife, your food, your space. If you take them," he said, "they're yours. I'll live without." She tilted her head, almost amused. "You mean it?" "Yes." "Stupid man," she muttered, but there was no venom in it. Later, she stood at the window, arms folded, staring at the washed streets. Her voice dropped lower, edged with the fear she rarely admitted. "If I walk outside, someone might recognize me." "They won't," Darren said. "You sound sure. I've lived here long enough. People don't look unless you make them. And if they do, they'll think you're just another woman who came to the verge to disappear." She studied his face for proof. "And if you're wrong, then you'll decide what happens next. Not me." The word again, decide. It unsettled her, because no one had ever left choices in her hands before. The weight of it felt heavier than chains. As the day wore on, the mood shifted. Saren prowled, less like a caged predator and more like someone exploring unfamiliar ground. She teased him once, tugging one of his shirts over her head, the fabric hanging loose, slipping low on her shoulders. She turned slowly, gauging his reaction. "You don't like this?" she asked, voice daring. "I like it," he admitted, steady, "but I won't take what you don't give." Her breath caught. She hated that answer and wanted it at the same time. She dropped onto the cot, pulling the blanket over her lap, watching him with a storm of emotions she couldn't yet name. By nightfall, the air between them had changed. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was no longer pure suspicion either. When she finally lay down, she didn't curl into a ball with her fists clenched. She stretched out, one hand flat on the mattress, the key resting beside it. Her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. "If I stay another night," she whispered, "it's because I want to, not because you let me." Darren, settling back into the chair, gave a single nod. "That's how it should be." And for the second night in a row, Saren closed her eyes without bracing for chains. The second night felt heavier than the first. The rain had eased, leaving the apartment wrapped in silence, broken only by the tick of the heater and the faint hum of the pipes in the wall. The air smelled faintly of boiled grain and damp fabric. Outside, the district lights flickered unevenly, bleeding faint amber through the blinds. Saren sat on the cot, her knees drawn close, the blanket sliding down her back. Her eyes followed Darren as he checked the stove and set the last of his tools aside. He moved with the same patience he had shown since opening the door to her, but patience now felt like pressure, like something that made the walls smaller, the air sharper. "You sit in that chair again," she said, voice low, "like you're a guard on watch." "I'm not guarding you," he answered. He set his jacket on the backrest, sat, and met her gaze. "I'm here so you don't wake up alone." Her lips twitched, caught between mockery and something softer. She stood, dropped the blanket onto the cot, and crossed the room barefoot. Her hair spilled over her shoulders, her violet skin catching the dim light in faint silver undertones. The bandages on her wrists were clean, but still raw, reminders of where she had come from. She stopped in front of him, arms crossed. "You keep saying I choose, that I decide. But what if I choose wrong? Then it's still yours," Darren said. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "And you? You just accept whatever I do." "No," he said quietly. "I accept you. That's different." The words landed heavier than any touch. She clenched her jaw, then leaned down suddenly, bracing her hands on the arms of his chair. Her face was inches from his, her breath hot, her eyes sharp. "You don't understand what I am," she hissed. "They call me Untamable because I don't bend, because I fight, because I break everything I touch." "I understand," he said. His voice didn't rise, didn't falter. "And I'm still here." Something in her cracked at that. Her throat tightened, her body trembling with anger and fear she couldn't push down. She pressed her forehead against his, teeth bared, as if daring him to flinch. He didn't. He stayed steady, heat radiating from him like a wall she couldn't topple. Her breath shuddered. Then she kissed him, fierce, bruising, testing again. But this time when he kissed back, she didn't pull away. She pushed harder, then softened, her lips parting, her body melting into his. The fight in her kiss gave way to hunger, raw and unguarded. Darren's hand rose, not to grab, but to cradle her face, steady and careful. His thumb brushed her cheek, his palm warm against her skin. She clutched his shirt, pulling him closer, straddling his lap without breaking the kiss. Her heart pounded against his chest, fast and unsteady. For the first time, she wasn't just testing, she was choosing. She broke the kiss only long enough to whisper, voice shaking. "If you take me now, it's because I asked, not because you wanted. I wanted since the door opened," he said, voice rough but steady. "But I waited for you." Her eyes burned, tears threatening but not falling. She pressed her forehead to his again, whispering, then stopped waiting. The rest unfolded slowly, deliberately, as if both of them knew rushing would ruin it. Darren lifted her carefully, carrying her the short distance to the cot. She clung to him, nails digging into his shoulders, not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of the choice she had just made. He laid her down and hovered above her, giving her every chance to push him away. She didn't. She pulled him down instead. Their closeness that night was raw, unpolished, and real. She moved with wild urgency, then froze with fear, then laughed breathlessly at her own trembling, then whispered sharp threats that melted into pleas. He matched her with steadiness, strong when she needed it, gentle when she faltered, silent when words would break the fragile trust forming between them. When it was over, she curled against him under the blanket, chest still rising fast, her fingers tangled in his shirt as if letting go would undo everything. Her voice was quiet, almost broken. "They said I'd never belong anywhere, that no one could keep me, that I'd always run." Darren kissed the top of her hair and answered simply, then let them be wrong. For the first time since the cage, Saren didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt like she had chosen a place to stay. And Darren, holding her in the dim light of the 7th floor apartment, knew he had kept his word. Not to tame her, not to claim her, but to be the place where her wildness could finally rest. The storm passed overnight, leaving the Rose Verge draped in a thin haze. By morning, sunlight pushed weakly through the blinds, tracing pale stripes across the floorboards. The district outside carried on its usual indifference, vendors unlocking their stalls, children chasing one another through puddles, scavengers hauling crates across the streets. The city did not notice that 2 lives in a crumbling tower had changed forever. Saren woke first. She lay still for a long while, eyes open, her body pressed against Darren's. His arm was heavy across her waist, steady and warm. She listened to his breathing, deep, unhurried, the kind of sleep only men with nothing left to prove allowed themselves. Her throat tightened. Why am I still here? Why haven't I run? The thought came as instinct, but it felt weaker now, more like a memory of how she used to survive rather than a command. She eased herself from under his arm and sat on the edge of the cot. The bandages on her wrists were loose. She unwound them slowly, looking at the angry red marks beneath. They no longer burned with shame. They throbbed with reminder. But when she turned her hand in the light, she realized the wounds were cleaner than they had been in months. Her chest tightened again. He did that, without asking anything back. Behind her, Darren stirred. He sat up, rubbed his beard with one hand, and stretched his back with a low groan. His eyes found hers immediately. No surprise, no confusion, just calm acknowledgement. "You're awake early," he said, his voice rough from sleep. "I thought about leaving," she admitted, voice blunt. "Taking your knife, your food, and disappearing into the verge." And she met his eyes. "I stayed." Darren nodded once, as if that answer was enough. He swung his legs off the cot and stood, adjusting his shirt. He didn't press her, didn't smile in triumph. He simply said, "Then today we start with food." Her lips twitched, almost a laugh. "Always food with you." "Food keeps people standing," he replied. "Standing gives them choices." She watched him work at the stove, the way his hands moved without waste, the way he kept his back straight, even in small tasks. She realized then what had unsettled her from the start. He didn't treat her as fragile or dangerous. He treated her as someone who mattered. The weight of that almost broke her. When he set a plate in front of her, warm bread, root slices, and the last of the grain porridge, she didn't devour it like before. She ate slowly, watching him across the table. He ate, too, and for the first time, it felt less like survival and more like sharing. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer. "I never told you what they called me." "You don't have to," Darren said. "They called me Untamable," she said anyway. Her eyes hardened, said I was too wild to train, too fierce to own. They stopped using my name. Saren became a curse word in their mouths. "And now?" he asked. She held his gaze. "Now I want to hear it from you." "Saren," he said, steady, like it was a truth that couldn't be twisted. Her throat closed around the sound. She gripped the edge of the table to anchor herself, then looked away, embarrassed by the sting in her eyes. "I'm not a curse. Not here." "No," he said. "Here you're free." The word landed like iron. Free. She had dreamed it in the cage, whispered it through broken teeth, spat it at the guards. But hearing it here, in this small apartment with bread in her hands and heat in her chest, it finally meant something real. She rose from the table and crossed to the window. The district stretched below, indifferent and ugly, but for the first time it didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like background. She turned, looking at Darren, standing in the soft light. His shirt was wrinkled, his beard rough, his boots worn, but he looked solid, permanent, steady. The kind of man who wouldn't vanish when the door shut. She walked back to him, standing close enough that their shoulders brushed. Her voice dropped low, quiet but certain. "I'm staying." His eyes searched hers. "Not because you feel you owe me." "No," she said firm. "Because I choose to." The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was full, complete, the kind of silence that didn't need breaking. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. He closed his around hers without hesitation. For the first time in her life, Saren didn't feel like a prisoner or a fugitive or a curse. She felt like herself, untamed, unbroken, but no longer alone. Darren squeezed her hand once firm. Then "This is home." She leaned into him, her forehead against his chest, her lips curving into something fierce and tender all at once. The 7th floor apartment, cracked walls, patched blankets, flickering lights, had become the one place in the Rose Verge where she belonged. And as the day began, the story ended not in chains, not in flight, but in the rarest victory. 2 broken lives choosing each other, equal, untamable, and finally free.